Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/malicious compliance. In today's episode, school? Nah, I think Starbucks instead. You're not a team player? As you wish. Bigoted dude gets arrested because he thinks a woman can't fix computers. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. School? Nah, I think Starbucks instead. I've seen quite a few back in high school stories lately, and thought I'd share my own experience. So to set the stage, I graduated high school in 2013 and my senior year was a challenge. My sister passed away, my health took a nosedive thanks to chronic illnesses that were progressively getting worse, I crashed and totaled a car, not my fault, but not a fun experience nonetheless, I had 2 concussions, you get the idea. The first half of the year tardies skyrocketed among the student body. The school changed the student parking areas and basically made it so that any students who drove themselves, and any students who used the door closest to that parking lot were caught in a huge bottleneck, and any one student goofing off could potentially keep literally hundreds of students from entering the building. It was ridiculous. Additionally, they decreased the between-class passing period from 7 minutes to 5 minutes. Mind you, if you were to walk from one end of the school to the other when the halls were completely empty, it would take you at least 5 minutes. Add 1,200 other people to the mix, and even 7 minutes was a time crunch. So tardies increased. A lot. And the administration got it in their heads that the best way to remedy this situation is to implement new punishments for being late to class. Prior to this year, after 5 tardies you had to attend an after-school detention with the teacher of whatever class you had missed. That's it. If you skipped class, unexcused by a parent or doctor, 5 times you received an in-school suspension. And if you missed more than 20 days of a class, excused or not, you had to repeat the class. There were some exceptions to that, but they were basically catastrophe exceptions. The new rules were ridiculous. If you were tardy to a class 3 times you received a suspension. If you skipped the class altogether, unexcused, you received a suspension. All it took was once. If you received 3 suspensions you had to retake the class. But if an absence was excused then there were no consequences. Oh, and they got rid of the 20-day absence/repeat rule. So, on to the fun. I was just burned out by the end of that first semester. I was stressed and upset and dealing with horrible panic attacks after my sister's death. My body constantly hurt thanks to undiagnosed pain conditions, and I couldn't stay awake in class to save my life. I was just over dealing with bullshit. I spent the entire first semester running from class to class, because my classes were clear across the school from each other. I lived less than 6 miles from the school, but was leaving over an hour before school started because of all the road construction going on between my house and the school. There was no way out of my subdivision that didn't involve a mile or more of closed lanes, plus there was construction on the road leading to the only entrance to the student parking lot. It was bullshit. I was a bit too tightly wound at the time. I was a straight A student, in all the AP classes I could fit in my schedule, and I had never, ever, been late to class. So being late to a couple classes that first semester was extremely upsetting, but I still hadn't even managed to warrant a detention. End of the first semester rolls around and we're all given a letter notifying us and our parents to the attendance change. Except they didn't include the change to the 20 absence/repeat rule. It just wasn't there at all. They were hoping by not including it in the letter, the change would be overlooked. It was not. Mwahaha. So second semester rolls around and my class schedule was changed because of human error, and I get thrown in a weightlifting class that I would not have signed up for if you paid me to. I was pissed. I was tired and in pain, and you had better believe lifting heavy objects for an hour a day 4 days a week was not my idea of a good time. The weekly swimming day didn't suck though. And then more construction showed up on my routes to school. And I was late. Very late. As in arrived to school midway through second period. So I'm in the office, in tears, being written up with a suspension thanks to citywide road construction, and the attendance secretary and counselor who oversaw these matters are showing no mercy or leniency. I'm handed the write-up to sign and a copy of the attendance policy. In full. And lo and behold, the change to the 20 absence/repeat is on there. As is the word unexcused. as in all unexcused absences will result in a 1-day suspension. Do you see it? Do you see the loophole? I cackled. I flat out cackled. Pulled out my cell phone, called my mom, said, "Hey, I'll explain later, but I need you to call the school and excuse me from first and second period. Thank you, love you, bye." And before I could even slide my phone back in my pocket, the attendance line rings. To say the secretary and counselor were pissed would be an understatement. But I wasn't done yet. After gleefully shredding the write-up, I asked if the attendance policy was mine to keep and proceeded to highlight the word unexcused and the change to the 20-day absence/repeat policy. I then turned to the counselor, "See. Me, so, I want to be sure I understand this correctly. If I show up late 3 times I get suspended?" "See, correct," said very snobbishly. "Me, if I ditch class I get suspended." "See, correct," said as he crossed his arms like he was trying to be extra intimidating. "Me, but if I get my mom to call or write me a note excusing me from class there are no repercussions." "See, correct." You could see him trying to work out if he still had the upper hand. But good luck getting a parent to agree to that. "Me, and it doesn't matter at all how many days I miss. The 20-day absence/repeat rule has been eliminated in full with no replacement?" And that's when he understood the loophole I'd found. I kid you not, watching that man crumple as he came to the conclusion that I found a way around the suspensions was the best fall of man I've ever seen. He uncrossed his arms and seemed to deflate straight onto a chair. "See, correct." "Me, wonderful. Thank you for your time. I've got some time before third period so I'm gonna go hit the vending machines, bye." And off I went. Strolled into third period with pretzels and a Coke, happy as a clam. That night my mom wrote me out roughly 50 notes that read, "I excuse L from blank periods. If you have any questions please give me a call at work number." Signed, Elf's mom, and she repeated writing out those notes a month or so later. I skipped everything. Gonna be cutting close to make it to first period? Skip it. Hit Starbucks instead. Don't want to go to that F*King weightlifting class? Don't. Take a 90-minute lunch instead. Overslept? Well, get some breakfast on the way to third period, but then skip that awful weightlifting class and come back for fifth and sixth periods. Need more time to study for a test or finish a project? Skip the morning altogether and only come in for that math test. Go home after second period to get ahead on that project. That weightlifting class? After the first few weeks I attended the swimming days and the game days, soccer or dodgeball, nothing else. Think about that. 1, maybe 2 days a week. For the whole semester. If I attended 30 classes total I'd be surprised. And of course, they called my mom to verify the notes and she flat out told them she had supplied me with fill-in-the-blank notes, and she would gladly verify them all as legitimate. The sheer amount of times I hit Starbucks at 9 a.m. on a school day was astounding. And it was done on purpose. I was flaunting that I had skipped classes. Every time I walked into that office with a Starbucks cup and a note I saw a little glimmer of fury in the secretary's eyes. If the counselor was there head lean against a wall and glare, but he couldn't do anything to stop me. Our district had a strict policy change policy, which meant that any changes to things like attendance policies and dress codes had to be implemented at the start of a semester and had to remain in place for the duration of the semester. That counselor tried to appeal to the school board to change the policy at every single meeting that semester. I attended the first one. Once of the school board members lost his sh*t laughing at the situation. He asked, "What idiot wrote this policy?" And that counselor turned Coke and read. They basically told him that he'd made this mess, he could deal with the fallout. They returned to the previous attendance policy the following school year. But as I was a senior, that didn't matter to me. Naturally, I told others of my discovery. And soon enough everyone was exploiting this loophole. Of course, some parents wouldn't excuse their kids, but enough would. We all showed up on count A though. My grades stayed at their previous level, and my mental and physical health improved as I was no longer running myself into the ground. All I know is that without that loophole I would have run myself into the ground and probably ended up in the hospital. That loophole saved my life. And after all I did was ask my mother to excuse my absences. It's not my fault I was allowed more than 20. You're not a team player? As you wish. This story is a couple years old, and like many things on the internet, you wait for the heat to die off to reduce the chance of recognition by the parties involved. I've seen a lot of malicious compliance posts against managers. This is one of a manager complying with employee demands. I was leading a team of technicians that included an on-call component. Every 4 to 6 weeks it was your turn on the roster to carry the phone and be available 24/7. You could live your life normally, but we advise techs not to plan a family event they can't leave unexpectedly, or a weekend trip more than an hour or two away from the office while on call. If you wanted to change the schedule, you needed a colleague to volunteer to swap. The roster was generated a few months in advance, and we had a very firm rule after being burned a couple times: no change is permanent until it's confirmed in the schedule, meaning myself or my supervisors has received a written confirmation from both parties. People have a tendency to change plans, so we made sure the team knew the bare minimum was an email from both techs agreeing to the change, then we update the schedule, then it is locked in stone. There are a few players to this melodrama. Me, the manager of all the teams in the area. My supervisor for Bob's team, Henry. The tech receiving malicious compliance, Bob, and the young tech who got screwed out of a weekend, Jim. Jim wants to attend a concert on a weekend he's scheduled to be on call. Jim successfully convinces Bob over lunch to swap with him and sends us an email to confirm. Very important to note that Henry and a few others are eating lunch with them. Henry hears the whole conversation. Bob does not reply with his acceptance, so there's no changes made at that time and everyone goes home for the day. When Bob eventually came clean, I learned what happened next. Bob mentions to his wife that evening the week on call he will swap with Jim. Bob's wife is not happy with this, and points out she wants to see her mother that weekend, so she demands he swaps back. Normally, if Bob had confirmed the change, it would be 100% his job to find a volunteer to take over, but Bob realizes he never agreed via email, so decides to play sneaky. He was a bit of a macho kind of guy, so I think a lot of what happened next was based on avoiding the appearance of his wife telling him what to do. The next day Bob responds in writing that actually there was not an agreement and he wouldn't take the shift. Taking everyone by surprise is the fact he didn't frame it as actually I can't take that shift, but instead went with Jim as lying, I never said that. Jim is upset he'll miss his concert, but per the rules, he is out of luck. There's suddenly tension in the office and techs taking sides between Bob and Jim, not a great situation for esprit de corps, so it's time for management to get involved. Henry wants to handle it, but he's a bit too riled up, so I pull Bob aside instead. I ask Bob what's going on. Hint that multiple people have upheld Jim's version of events. Is there something we can do here to ease the tension? I'm asking you to be a team player here and come clean for me. You don't have to take the shift, but I don't like when techs are mudslinging each other. No, says Bob, Jim is a liar and the rest of them must have heard it wrong, or they're lying too. I never agreed to this, and I don't want to be a team player with these liars. You don't want to be a team player, is that right? Yes. I'm just going to look out for myself since I can't trust these young guys on the team like Jim. Whatever you say, Bob. Cue the malicious compliance. For the rest of the year, every time Bob needed a hand, he was left hanging, within reason. I'm not risking my own performance numbers here. Difficult job that would be easier with two? Sorry, Bob, all the older team members are scheduled elsewhere. You'll have to do it alone since you don't trust these younger techs. Bob wants a hand moving some equipment to the delivery van? Sorry, the team is busy with other tasks. I'm sure you can handle it solo. Bob got the picture pretty quick that severing himself from the team was a bad idea, but from stubbornness or machismo he stuck it out and refused to come clean or stop glaring at the newer team members. Evidently, to preserve his version of events he had to maintain an air of distrust for the younger techs, or he just blamed them collectively, I don't know. That carried on until end-of-year reviews came around. In our office you could pick a few personal objectives, and this was a great way to get a good review even if we had a bad year. For example, some people set educational goals and got a new certificate or two in the company learning portal which, if achieved, would lift their average performance score. Bob in his infinite wisdom had listed a few personal objectives that were remarkably social in nature. Teamwork was one. Sharing knowledge with new team members was another. These were pretty good objectives for an older, more experienced tech who could lend a hand to teammates and get some positive feedback to show his bosses by the end of the year. These were not good objectives to have when you have very clearly stated you are not a team player, and have been working almost completely solo for half the year. The fallout. Bob took a pretty big hit on his performance scores that year. It lowered his bonus by a few $100, and for the first time in years there were no glowing reviews by colleagues that he could use to his advantage, not to mention his own words being thrown back in his face on all his personal objectives. I had Henry signal me quietly as the meeting was winding down so I could drop by and add my 2 cents. To a very crestfallen Bob I asked, "Still feeling like you don't want to be a team player, Bob? We missed your old self these past few months." Bob takes a moment to respond and then starts laughing. He shakes his head a bit and answers, "You're right, I do miss being a team player. Things got a little out of hand. I think I'll focus on that for next year." I told him I was glad to hear it, gave a wink to Henry, and their meeting continued in a much more positive note after I left. The whole saga had taken 6 months, but in the end, Bob apologized to Henry for lying. The next week Bob took Jim out for lunch, and he spent the next year being the absolute gold star example of a team player. I spent some political capital arguing with HR, and was able to give him a raise at his next review in recognition of his efforts. Bigoted dude gets arrested because he thinks a woman can't fix computers. Long-time reader, first-time poster. I don't even know if it goes here, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Back in 2006, I worked for one of those big box stores that had an IT desk, formerly known as NerdHerd LOL, where people could bring devices in to get serviced if there was a problem. We were located in Columbus, Georgia, which is right over a bridge from Phoenix City, AL. This is important because, where our store was placed, we would normally get a lot of servicemen and women coming up from Fort Benning who were generally pretty cool. But we would also get folks, mostly from Alabama, who were, let's just say, slightly unfavorable to folks of a certain skin color or gender. No offense to those who live in AL who are totally awesome. You know who you are. Now, I'm a 5 feet 1 inch girl who, at the time, weighed a total of 120 pounds soaking wet. I was practically a hobbit. I was also one of the lead technicians in the department. I was the one the new hires went to if they were confused or couldn't troubleshoot certain problems. The team I worked with was amazing. The general manager of the store was great and the supervisor of my department was the man. I would regularly go out for drinks with these people. One of the best places I've ever worked, even though it was retail. One day, I'm working the counter to check customers in and do evaluations and diagnostics to give an estimate of what the repair price would be. In comes, let's call him Joe. He's wore a cut-off t-shirt, worn denim jeans, and a baseball cap with a Confederate flag on it that just barely covered his business in the front, party in the back haircut. I am not one to judge on looks. I've had plenty of people come in looking exactly the same way this guy did who have been an absolute delight to work with. Never judge a book by its cover, kids. But I still have my defenses up, just in case. I really hoped it wasn't going to go the not-so-friendly route. I was unfortunately wrong about Dear Joe. Joe walks up to the counter with his PC tower and practically slams the unit on the desk. "Joe, I need this fixed. It's broken." Me, "Okay, sir. Let me have a look and I'll see if I see a..." Joe cuts me off and stares at me with a disgusted look on his face. "Joe, excuse me?" Me, "If you give me a moment, sir, I'll be able to take a look at your computer and..." Joe, hell no. It was at this point that I realized where this was inevitably going to go wrong. Me, "Unfortunately, sir, I won't be able to give you an estimate if you don't let me diagnose your computer." Joe, "There is no way in hell a woman knows about computers. I'm not letting you touch my computer. Get me the manager." Oh, yes. I thought, this is going to be King awesome. I'm sure he wanted to talk to the general manager of the store, but I couldn't resist. Cue malicious compliance. I could have pulled the "I'm the manager" thing, because I was one of the senior staff, but my direct boss was actually out back working on repair projects and I couldn't help but get excited about how this was going to go down. Me, "As lovely as sweet tea, of course, sir. Right away, sir." Mike, my supervisor, the guy who ran our department, and not the general manager of the store, was elbow deep in a motherboard replacement when I walked in, and gave him the biggest, shit-eating grin. Me, hey, Mike. There's a guy out there asking for the manager. He looks at me confused because he was just supervisor, but I then proceeded to tell him exactly what was waiting for him out front. His face split into the brightest smile. He then proceeded to walk out to the front. Have I mentioned that Mike is a 6 feet 3 inches, 280 pounds black man who looked like he could eat a Mack truck for lunch? He was such a big, lovable teddy bear. We all adored him. The moment Mike stepped out, the customer freaked. Mike, hello sir. I hear there's a problem? Joe lost it. It started with a fuck no before devolving into a racist tirade that I have never witnessed in my life. I'm from Massachusetts, so this was awful, yet amazing to watch. Like a car crash. I just couldn't look away. Not that we have no racism in the Northeast, but damn. Joe kept screaming, using the nastiest slur, you know the one, over and over again while staff and customers alike watched in blatant horror. Security ended up having to come over to try to calm the man down. Our entire security team was black as well, so, naturally, Joe went even more crazy. Eventually, the police had to be called because the man was threatening me, calling me a cunt and a bitch, and threatening security and my boss, using that word that is not okay. My general manager got called out of his office and immediately called the police to have the man removed. God bless whichever dispatcher who received the call was, because they dispatched 2 black officers to the scene. Me and my general manager were literally the only white people involved in this train wreck, aside from bigoted Joe, and I watched with unbridled glee as Joe was cuffed and taken away by the police. Watching Joe foam at the mouth as he was dragged away made my whole week. Thank you for the entertainment, bigoted Joe. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.